And now joined by John Brain in Washington, D.C. and Andrew Hopkins, who's in Ankara. Well, let's cross over to D.C. first. Hi, John. So explain to us what it all means.
Well, I think it means that the US has run out of patience with Turkey over the Andrew Brunson affair. And it's sending a very strong message with these sanctions. But I think these sanctions are perhaps more symbolic than anything else, because they're not harming the Turkish economy as such. They're targeted at two individuals. But let's get some more from Kılıç Kanat from the Turkish think tank SETA. Two NATO allies now at loggerheads, one imposing sanctions on the other. What's gone wrong?
Well, it is, of course, one of the most shocking events in probably in the history of NATO as well. Nobody was expecting such a sanction, especially about two ministers that has been whose institutions has been very active in the fight against terrorism, and whose institutions have been in cooperation with the U.S. officials in multiple different issue areas, including the fight against ISIS. So this is something not expected, and probably one of the worst crises in U.S.-Turkish relations for the last 2 or 3 decades.
Well, is a crisis easily solvable by releasing Pastor Brunson?
Well, for the last 2 weeks, actually, this talks has been going on, but the Turkish authorities have been expressing that there is a judicial independence, and the release of Pastor Brunson will depend on the judiciary's decision. And actually, there was a positive development that he's now in house arrest instead of being in prison, and everybody was expecting that this would bring a calm in relations. However, it was the Vice President Pence statements immediately after that decision was shocking, because a week before that decision, the court made another decision basically rejecting the request of the attorneys of Pastor Brunson to release him from the prison, and there wasn't any such reaction, but reaction came after the house arrest, and it was, in Turkey, it was interpreted as a domestic politics issue for Vice President Pence at this point.
Have we got to a situation now where both sides, the rhetoric has been so strong that neither is going to be able to climb down?
Well, there will be a summit between Foreign Minister and Secretary of State in a couple of days in Singapore.
Mike Pompeo.
Yeah, Mike Pompeo in Singapore. So we are expecting a positive development after that summit. But of course, the rhetoric is especially important. The tweet and especially Vice President Pence's statement has been considered very offensive in Turkey, and threatening Turkey with sanctions, threatening Turkey and using that language doesn't help two countries that has been in cooperation in multiple different issue areas in the region, especially considering the instability in the region in such a turbulent times.
Well, you say they've been in cooperation. Actually, the two countries have been falling out over numerous issues, including in Syria.
Well, Manbij agreement was something that two countries, it was a welcome development. Many people considered this as a honeymoon, actually, in relations, considering that two countries, for the first time in 2 years, in regards to YPG and YPG-held territories, reached an agreement. And when you look at two countries, they are working in Afghanistan together. They agree on issues like Crimea, in Balkans. So this is something important. These cooperation areas are important, and especially in the fight against terrorism, two countries has been in coordination in their policies.
Okay, thank you very much.
No
we'll
problem.
have to leave it there. Well, that's one of the views from here in Washington, but this case certainly has a way to go before a resolution. Back to you.
Well, thank you very much for that there, John Brain, and to you, guest. Now, let's cross over to Turkey's capital, Ankara. Our diplomatic correspondent, Andrew Hopkins, is there. So, Andrew, what is the reaction of the Turkish government?
Well, actually, we're waiting for a statement at the moment from the Turkish Foreign Ministry, their reaction to this move by the United States. But I don't think it will have been much of a surprise to the Turkish government in view of the fact of the statements from the US President, Vice President, and also the fact that the Turkish Foreign Minister, Mevlut Çavuşoğlu, has been on the phone 3 times to his US counterpart in the last few days. But I think what we're likely to see here is action that reflects what the Turkish President has been saying on this issue for the last few days, that Turkey will stand firm, is likely to impose sanctions of its own, although there's no indication of what those sanctions are likely to be in the coming days. And he also warned the United States that it's likely to lose a sincere ally. Just to give you an example of the kinds of things he's talking about, how these two countries cooperate. At the moment, there's a senior US military commander who's in Turkey. He's been meeting government officials today. Tomorrow, he's going to Incirlik Air Base, where US forces are based. Then after that, he's going to Izmir, which is also in Turkey, which is actually the headquarters of the NATO land forces. So under normal circumstances, these two countries do a lot. It does seem at the moment these sanctions may be just symbolic, because as far as we understand it, the two ministers, Justice Minister and the Interior Minister, don't really seem to have any companies or property in the United States. So it may be that it's just an attempt at a warning from the United States at the moment.
But Turkey and US have been at odds about a number of issues. So where does this leave Turkey-US relations?
Yeah, it does seem that as soon as these two sides really try to start patching up one crisis, then another one erupts. Your guest you had on a short while ago referred to one of the particular issues, the United States support for the YPG in northern Syria, a group that Turkey regards as a terrorist organisation. Also, Turkey's decision to buy a missile defence system from Russia. Also, the conviction of a Turkish banker in a court case in the United States about a conspiracy to evade Iranian sanctions. There's a whole lot of problems here. You may even remember a visa row that was going on last year between the two countries, the United States and Turkey. Now, when Rex Tillerson came to Ankara at the start of this year, they set up a series of working groups to deal with a lot of these issues, such as the YPG and also that visa row, which may now encompass the Andrew Brunson case as well. So there's still a lot, really, for these two countries to work on, and they don't really seem to be getting that much better at the moment.
Many thanks for that there, Andrew Hopkins, live from Ankara.